When I come around, got the whole thing wobbin', wobbin'.
Now we go into our final topic, the SEC preview. Now last week we did the ACC, and up there we talked about how Clemson has to be, the favorites to win it all. Here, well, I have at least 3 contenders here for playoff teams, but we'll talk about that later. Here is my SEC preview, both for the East and the West. In the West, I believe Alabama's going to go 12-0. The only game of concern for Alabama is Auburn, which doesn't come to a surprise because each and every year the Iron Bowl seems to always have sort of miraculous play or go into the fourth quarter or whatnot. And I think that this year Alabama is relatively set up. I do love the talent Alabama has created there, and I do believe they picked the best quarterback to be their starter. Granted, they haven't released who's the starter yet, but Toa looks to be the guy. In the East, go ahead.
Their schedule plays out. I'm looking at it right now. Their schedule really plays out to be a kind of a walkthrough for the first ones. I really can't see anyone really being a challenger or a contender, because even if they play a sloppy first half or something of that nature, they could always impose their will at some point in the second half against every one of these teams. You look at Louisville, Arkansas, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, UNL, Louisiana, Lafayette, Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, LSU, Mississippi State, the Citadel. None of them, even if you take a lead at them and try to hope and hold still, your lead is not good enough. I don't think that there's anybody on that schedule that I see that can possibly beat them.
Right, exactly. I have them going 12-0, and Auburn being the only game.
Auburn as well too.
Yeah.
I don't think that even Auburn can even hang with them right now. Alabama's on a whole new level as far as how great they are. Although they do have a lot of young players on their defense, a bunch of new starters. They lost a bunch. I believe that they only have 3 returning starters. Terrell Lewis, you can kind of put him as a starter as well too, because he got hurt in the first game against Florida State and didn't play the rest of the year.
Right.
But other than that, everybody else on that defense is coming back, and it's not is brand new. Him, Isaiah Bug, Raquan Davis were the only few ones that are coming back for Alabama this year.
Auburn is next on the west side that I have going 10-2. The 2 games of concern I have for them is Washington and Texas A&M. Now, the 2 games they lose to is Georgia and Alabama. To Georgia, who I am going to talk about being the best team in the East. Auburn kind of has a rough schedule with those, but I do believe that they should be able to beat the rest of their competition easily. Now, go ahead.
LSU always plays Auburn hard, so that one might be a one that might get close. But overall, I think that the better of the 2 teams is really Auburn, and Auburn should win this game. But for some odd reason, LSU always plays Auburn really well.
Right. Speaking of LSU, here's the pick that I have. I believe that they're going to go 6-6 this year. This is very. The thing is, I think 6-6 is relatively where I think at their best they can go 8-4 with the talent they have.
I have them at 7-5.
But yeah, but you get where I'm going with this is the fact that
I looked at their schedule when we were talking the other day off air, and I went and looked at LSU's schedule, and I marked them down for 7-5. It's a rough one. It's not an easy schedule by any means necessary. They're going into the swamp. They're going at Auburn. They're going to have to face Alabama. They're facing Miami at the beginning of the season in Arlington. These are not walk-through games. They have a rough schedule, plus a bunch of new guys.
Yeah, exactly. Well, which we had mentioned. It's like what we were teasing at about LSU is that you're getting a whole lot of these transfers and stuff like that, but ultimately I don't know how well you're going to do with with them offensively. I have yet to see them produce, be able to get any sort of competent level at quarterback, except when they had Zach Mettenberger, and that time that was the one year that they didn't decide to play good defense.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of I understand they are immensely talented there. They do have notable, wonderful guys out there. It's just the fact that I think their coaching ultimately fails them. And the schedule, they got really screwed on the schedule this year, I believe.
Yeah, but they put that schedule on.
Exactly.
Put that schedule for them. So, blame that in the conference people. But at the same time, it's a hard schedule. You got to go and fight through it. Nobody said it's going to be easy to win over at LSU, and they have enough talent. But it's going to come down to who wins the quarterback battle as well too, and how well they play. That's what it's really going to come down to. But I'm really seeing 7-5, 8-4.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, 8-4 would be a best.
Probably like the high end. So like it's still not going to make that much of a difference. It's still going to be a rough year. And a lot of people are going to be asking for Ed Orgeron's walking papers.
Oh yeah. Next, here's another surprising team. I have Texas A&M going 9-3 this season. I believe that Jimbo Fisher is going to have a lot of early successes, and it's going to be a lot on the young players out there. This team is going to be overhauled on a lot of young talent. You're not going to see a lot of senior to even junior guys on the field this year, and I think that Jimbo Fisher is going to make them play better than what they're supposed to be. He's going to get the best out of in a sense, not really worse situation, but I think he's going to surprise a lot of these teams, and the teams that I have him losing to, obviously Alabama and Auburn, but I do believe he can beat in LSU. He can beat a Mississippi State. He can beat in Ole Miss and in Arkansas this year. But that youth could bite him, in the ass later on, where he could end up going 6-6 because he started too many young guys who aren't ready for the big stage. But yeah, I have Texas A&M going 9-3, and relatively to round out the other teams, Mississippi State 7-5, Ole Miss 4-8, and Arkansas 6-6 for me. On the east side, Georgia, I have them going 12-0. They have set up really well. You don't play Alabama. The only game you really play is Auburn, and even then, I still believe that they're going to pretty much beat them. The only game in question I gave them was Auburn this year. How do you feel about Georgia's outlook this year?
Yeah, but they do go into some hostile environments early on. They have to face South Carolina, Missouri. They have a road game against LSU. I think that they didn't get got for one game. Kentucky's not going to be slouched this year either. So if you're looking for maybe an upset when you're sitting high at number one during the regular season and those type of things, and you look for a little hangover games right after playing an emotional game against Florida, probably you could be seeing Kentucky pull it off on them.
Right.
Off the road in early November. That kind of stuff happens all the time in college football. I could see that happening as well too. But if you're just saying betting odds, they should be 12-0 going into the SEC championship. Right.
I have Florida at 10-2 as my next team. The only games in question I have for me is Florida State and Mississippi State. Really. This year, I do think Florida. They are a very talented team. You upgrade at head coach at Dan Mullen. He's going to get the best out of your players, especially on that scheme. There. Georgia, they're going to be losing to Georgia. I 100% believe in that. And still relatively a young a transitioning team as well too, but I do believe 10-2 would be a relatively safe bet of where they're going to end up being. What about you? What do you think about Florida?
I'm a little bit lower than you are. I've got them at 8-4.
Okay, what's your reasoning behind
5-3 in that conference? I could see the Mississippi loss. I could also see Florida State loss, and I definitely see Georgia, as well as possibly losing to Missouri again.
Right. Yeah, it's gonna be in the East. I feel like it's Georgia and everybody else. But you are pretty high.
It's just Alabama has a smooth schedule going down the line, but in the East, it just seems like this year the SEC's collision is just set in stone that it's going to happen. Like, and more so than I've ever felt in any conference, that it's a set in stone that two teams are going to collide at the end of the year, and that's going to be Georgia and Alabama. They're probably both going to be undefeated if both are healthy and everything goes right. You know, I expect both to be sitting there in Atlanta at the end of the year.
Exactly. 100% agree on that. But you're pretty high on South Carolina as well, too. Can you tell me about how you feel about South Carolina this season?
Jake Brentley, man, he's one of the best young quarterbacks in this conference. He's had so much experience. He's been through a whole bunch. And their outlook last year, they ended up going 9-4 with not the most easiest schedule, especially now that they get back their best player. They did this 9-4 thing without essentially their best player in Deebo Samuel, you know, and their defense has definitely have gotten a boost from their head coach, you know, out there in the way that he's been leading this team. And Muschamp has been excellent for that defense, and the way he's been attacking a bunch of the SEC defenses. They're going to get a lot of SEC wins, and they're probably the only team I really truly believe that can push Georgia in the SEC East.
Right.
That truly can challenge them. Like, if there's an Auburn to Georgia's Alabama, I mean, like how Auburn and Alabama is kind of fighting for that West, it's maybe South Carolina for me. Most people don't have them ranked, but I think that they will end up finishing the season ranked in the top 15.
Okay, I agree with that. I have them going 8-4. I do see the talent. I love Deebo Samuel out there. I do like their quarterback as well out there too, especially in the East where, I mean, I have Kentucky going 8-4. I think Mizzo will have a winning season this year. And Vanderbilt and Tennessee I have losing this year. I think Tennessee is going to be a 4-8 team.
Yeah, those are the two teams I don't think that are going to end up being bowl eligible.
Yeah.
At the SEC East.
Yeah, exact. Now, speaking of being bowl eligible, so my playoff teams this year, Alabama, Georgia, and Auburn. I think those are the playoff teams this year for me.
It'll be a 3-man SEC.
No, not thinking a 3-man. I don't think, but I mean like that they are playoff. Like, I think if you're gonna pick what teams are best likely to go to the playoffs out the SEC, I think Alabama, Georgia, and Auburn. If you were gonna place a bet on teams.
Oh yeah. Yeah, everybody's gonna. That's kind of the obvious one, but yeah, I would have to agree with you on that one. But I think that it's really Georgia and Alabama that's gonna come down to both of them, and I don't think that there's not gonna be a 2 conference teams in the playoffs this year. I don't think it's gonna happen again like it happened last year. Last year was just kind of a fluky year because Auburn did a disservice to themselves by actually beating Alabama in a way.
Right, exactly.
You know, by eliminating them, they didn't have to face Georgia, and Georgia gets in. So they got both Alabama and Georgia in by beating both of them.
Right, exactly. Then, and that's about it. That goes for our playoff teams. Now we go into best players in the conference. My, oh my, is this a long list. By best players, we usually mean standout players within the conference and also probably relatively within the country. Especially since it's the SEC, we're looking at most likely some of the best players in their position. Jarrett Stidham, we have already said, #1 quarterback in the country. There's no way he's not on this list. Tua.
You also got to put Tua.
Tua as well.
Tagovailoa.
Yep.
I can't still pronounce his name, but yeah. I tried my best.
Then I have 2 Alabama offensive linemen, Jonah Williams and Alex Leatherwood, a true freshman who started at right tackle this past season.
Benny Snell, I'll add his name in there too in Kentucky, the running back.
Right.
Yeah, he's definitely been he's definitely one of those guys. If you had an honorable mention on that running backs list that we made, Benny Snell would have been a name that we could have really definitely put in there, and I wouldn't have felt really bad about it.
To round out the rest of the great Alabama players on here, Damian Harris, Gene Harris, Raekwon Davis, defensive lineman for Alabama, Mac Wilson, and Dylan Moses for the linebackers for Alabama. Any other Alabama guys that you feel like that I did not mention on here that should get some love?
I like Tavon Diggs. I for the short period of time when he got to play, I really liked what he was when he showed out there. I also would be interested in seeing how Terrell Lewis comes back from his injury, because he had a bunch of hype last year, but he just ended up getting hurt in the first game of the year and didn't get the opportunity that most Alabama edge rushers would get.
Right. Then we have a whole lot of Georgia players as well too. Jake Fromm, Isaiah Wilson, another notable true freshman tackle that started last year, DeAndre Swift, and their wide receivers here, Terry Godwin, Ridley Ridley, McCole Hartman. Now here's the thing I've asked you outside the podcast. What wide receiver core would you have, Alabama's or Georgia's? I would think Alabama. What's your reasoning behind that?
Jerry Jeudy. That's it. I mean, Riley Ridley is a good number one, or Terry Godwin, but they're not Jerry Jeudy. I would take Jerry Jeudy over all of those guys. So they're both teams have loaded at wide receiver, but they don't have that number one wide receiver like Jerry Jeudy. That's what Georgia is kind of missing out. Like if everything goes all out and fails, this is the wide receiver that I'm going to go to, and that Georgia doesn't really have that guy. They have a bunch of really good guys. A more balanced receiving core is Georgia's, but if you had to go and compare which one I would take Alabama's.
Right. Arnez Williams, or as everybody knows him as Greedy Williams, out there in LSU. Greg Little out of Ole Miss, Nick Fitzgerald out of Mississippi State, Drew Lock out of Mizzo, Kyle Phillips and Shai Tuttle out of Tennessee, and Daylon Mack out of Texas A&M. Any other guys that you feel like I've missed out on this list for best players in the conference?
Did you mention Drew Lock?
Yeah, Drew Lock, my bad, out of Mizzo.
Missouri. There's a tight end, C.J. Conrad from Kentucky. I also like. You could also you gotta throw shout outs for A&M with Trayvon Williams, who's gonna get the Dalvin Cook treatment from Jimbo Fisher out there. He's gonna be catching passes. He's gonna be running the passes. He's gonna be everything for Texas A&M. So don't sleep on him too much either. And Jordan Scarlett's coming back as well too. So that's one of the names of guys that's coming back. Mississippi State has a couple of defenders, Jeffrey Simmons and Montez Sweat, both who passed up on the NFL draft, coming back to the college football, and probably the best linebacker in the conference and maybe even in the country, Devin White, the linebacker from LSU.
Right, exactly. So that rounds up our new our best players in the conference. Now we have Heisman hopefuls and impact freshmen. Heisman hopefuls: Jarrett Stidham for me, Jake Fromm, Tua, and Damian Harris. What do you feel about that list?
I can't see why not. Benny Snell will be nice and all, but Kentucky won't win enough games, and they'll probably be playing from behind too much for him to get those numbers. But yeah, that's the only other one that you could possibly do that. And if Deebo Samuel starts off hot like he did the last year, and continues it without getting hurt. Like last year, Deebo Samuel, if you had looked at what he was doing, he could have been a Heisman candidate. So that's the only other one. If he continues that path where he's kick returning for touchdowns and punt returning for touchdowns and then scoring touchdowns, playing wide receiver.
Right, exactly.
But yeah, pretty much your list.
Yeah, my favorites are Jarrett Stidham, Tua, and Jake Fromm really are the headlines for me for Heisman winner.
Yeah, I would have Stidham last year as my Heisman Trophy winner. I can't go with the same guy as last year. So yeah, but if I had to pick one, it would probably be Stidham or Tua, because Tua's going to win a bunch of games out there for Alabama,
right? And also and put up some ridiculous highlights, as he did even coming in as a backup this season. Impact freshman, this is something that I really cover more between the two of us. I do a lot between the two of us. Antoine does a lot of studying for college football players going into the NFL draft, whereas I do a lot of studying on high school football and impact freshmen, and a lot of guys you may have not have heard of entering here, but this is the SEC, well, big fan base, and most of you guys know these guys. Impact freshman, number one impact freshman for me, Patrick Surtain, going to Alabama. We are talking about one of a generational type of player at defensive back here, going to the best team in the country, and a guy who puts defensive backs in the NFL. Granted, LSU was getting a bit butthurt, especially guys like Jarvis Landry, telling him that he isn't really an LSU guy. Well, let me tell you this, Patrick Surtain can straight up ball, and his teammate as well, Tyson Campbell, is on this list as well, going to Georgia. Zamir White is also one of my top notable guys. Georgia tends to play a lot. If you're talented at running back, you get touches at there as a true freshman. We have seen it with Todd Gurley, even with his running mate from North Carolina, Marshall. This Bradley Chubb? Nick Chubb got a lot of looks out there. Quarterback-wise, we got Emory Jones. I believe he may even take the starting role out there at Florida. Matt Corral out there in Mississippi. James Cook, younger brother of Dalvin Cook, is going to be running the ball there at Georgia as well. Terrence Marshall Jr., right there, wide receiver for LSU. Jalen Waddle, wide receiver out there for Alabama as well. And Jacob Copeland, wide receiver for Florida. And Texas A&M. Their whole 2018 class, you're going to see it. They have 23 early enrollees this year. But if I was going to pick the best of the bunch of their early enrollees, Leon O'Neal Jr., safety for Texas A&M. Jalen Preston, wide receiver for Texas A&M. Colton Blanton, offensive tackle. Offensive lineman in general, I expect him to play tackle. And Kellen Mond, a redshirt freshman for a quarterback there. Because I fully expect that Jimbo Fisher is going to be playing a lot of new guys and whatever, because over there I think it's a wide open competition, except for true guys who are true studs and whoever's going to fit his system the best, regardless of classification, whether you're a true freshman or you're a redshirt senior. He's going to play the best guys to fit his system. And that knows about it for our SEC preview. Thank you for joining us today in our podcast. Please like and subscribe. Click that bell notification so you can always be notified when we produce new content here. And thank you for joining us, and until next time.